Good afternoon, participants. Welcome to this internal Auditors Forum. My name is Veronica Nambajwe, CPA, Education Officer at the Institute, in charge of study materials. Our topic today is the role of internal audit function in building a robust ethical culture. I hope by the end of this forum, our learning outcomes will be able to get them. The chairperson for today is CPA Stephen Musherure, who is the head of internal audit at Statewide Insurance Company Limited. He is a Bachelor of Commerce from Makerere University graduate. He holds CPA Uganda. He's a final year student of MBA Business Analytics, a certified tax advisor finalist, certified internal auditor student. He's a tutor for audit practice and assurance and advanced tax papers. He's a member of the internal audit panel for Icpau. He leads the internal audit team at Statewide Insurance Company. He's a member of the marketing and website board committee for the Institute of Internal Auditors, Uganda. Join me to welcome our chairperson, CPA Stephen Musherure.
Thank you, Veronica, for that kind introduction. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you all this afternoon to this webinar to learn more about how internal audit can build a good ethical culture in the work environment. My role is simple. We have today in the house an experienced presenter. He's an internal auditor. His name is CPA Samuel Agure Makanti. He's a director at SAMI Professional Trainers and Consultants, and he's also an assistant manager internal audit at the Deposit Protection Fund. He's currently the chairperson of the Icpau editorial board, a member of the Finance, Planning and Administration Committee of Icpau Council, and a member of the Mukono Diocesan Finance Board. Previously, he worked as an internal auditor at the Bank of Uganda and as an external auditor at the Office of the Auditor General. He's a full member of Icpau and the Institute of Internal Auditors. In September 2022, he was recognized by Icpau as the Young Accountant of the Year 2022 during the Accountant Service Awards. He holds a Master's of Business Administration, Accounting, and a first-class Bachelor's of Business Administration and Accounting of Makerere University. Joining me to welcome CPA Samuel Agure Makanti. Samuel, over to you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen, for that kind introduction. I believe that I'm loud and clear from that side. Yes, Stephen, am I audible?
Yes, Samuel, you are.
I'm audible. Thank you for that kind introduction, and thank you, Secretariat, for organizing this internal audit webinar. It is the Internal Auditors Forum, and we are so grateful to the Institute for the continued arrangements towards sharpening our skills as internal audit. I believe that my chair, Stephen, also my screen is visible. Is it visible, Chair? Chair. Is my screen also visible so that we move at the same pace? Yes, Stephen?
Yes, it is visible.
Okay, it is visible. We welcome the ladies and gentlemen onto this platform. We are going to share insights into the role of internal audit function in building a robust ethical culture. And Stephen has done me justice in terms of summarizing the introduction about me. And I'm just going to drill into directly the presentation. And today's presentation, we are talking about the soft skills which require attention to the auditors. Auditors, we are called upon to provide assurance as well as consulting or advisory services to the organizations where we work. But one of the soft skills, which is the basis of governance processes, the foundation of risk management practices, and the foundation of good internal controls, is actually culture. As I was attending the recent IIA International Engagement in Amsterdam, this was one of the thematic areas which was focused on, and several presenters made presentations on the aspect of culture. Therefore, in that IIA International Engagement, which we had in Amsterdam, one of the key issues which came throughout is that internal auditors, we have focused most of our efforts on the traditional assurance engagements. And quite a number of presenters were leading us or probing us to think about the non-assurance engagements. And one of the soft skills to audit is actually organizational culture. How are things done in the organization? And as an internal auditor, as the head of audit, what value can you add? Because as we shall run through the presentation, I will highlight the key areas of focus and the most important thing from the beginning, that our organizations need robust ethical cultures. As an outline of the presentation, I would first of all give a glance or an overview to the presentation and highlight the key areas of concern. What are some of the key areas of concern? Auditors, we are focusing mainly on governance. We review internal controls. We review the risk management practices. But when have you ever conducted an audit of the organization's culture? Because culture is the basis of everything in an organization. Internal auditing, I'll talk about internal auditing and the mandate, as well as the positioning. Given that we occupy the third line of defense, as per the IIA governance framework, basically we are the third line of defense, and given that we are occupying the third line of defense, we can do much to change the organization's culture. And our mandate, we are destined to add value to the organization, to enhance and protect that value. The question would be that as an internal auditor, as management, have you thought about how we can change the culture of the particular institution? Thirdly, we shall talk about ethical culture, because this is very important. These are shared perceptions, shared values within the organization. Ethics talks about basically understanding the right and the wrong to be done. What can we better improve such practices? What are the drivers and the effects of ethical culture? What determines the ethical culture of an organization? What is the impact of ethical culture? The moment we decide, all of us in the organization, to have some shared perceptions, we have some shared values, and we understand if an external party comes and asks you, how are things done here? You can describe and the culture must be embedded in the behaviors of the staff. What are the key ethical risks in 2023? What are some of the key ethical risks which should trigger us as auditors to think of as we are actually conducting the culture audits? Establishment of a robust ethical culture. One of the core learning outcomes of this engagement, the third one, as Veronica has hinted on it, it is to see that internal auditors we can add value to this soft asset. It's an intangible asset of an organization. Therefore, how do we establish a robust ethical culture, and how do we advise management and the board on how the culture of an institution can be improved? We shall also finally look at the roles of management, the role of the board, the role of internal audit function. And under this, I'll highlight the major considerations in respect of auditing culture. It's one of the key areas. As I have pointed out, this area we have not given it prominence, but it is the basis of each and everything which occurs in an organization. And then I'll conclude with some parting thoughts, as also emphasized by earlier researchers on this area. Those conclusions, I'll conclude with some parting thoughts, and then we have an engagement at the end of the day where I expect comments to come from the audience, as well as questions, which we can be able to respond to in respect of how we can build an ethical culture in our respective organizations. As an overview, a robust ethical culture is the foundation of proper governance processes, effective internal controls, and risk management practices. I decided to put these items in red because they are the focal points of internal audit. For every internal audit you conduct, you provide assurance on the extent to which the different governance processes have been actually established and complied with. Every audit you conduct, you are looking at how strong, how weak are the internal controls. Every audit you conduct, you are looking at risk management practices. How is risk management embedded into the organization? When you talk about ideally the COSO framework, when you look at the ISO standard 31000 on risk management, it requires that risk management practices must be included and embedded into the organization's practices. The question would be, is the culture of your institution permitting or allowing for proper governance? Does the culture allow for effective internal controls to be implemented? Does the culture allow for implementation of proper risk management practices? As we are identifying risks, as you assess the risks, as you mitigate the risks, what is the culture like in terms of the attitudes of the major risk managers and owners? The purpose of the robust ethical culture is actually to steer our employees as an institution to choose to do the right thing. Culture is very, very important, and it should be ethical, meaning something which you can accept. What are the do's and the don'ts in an organization? Employees, we need to share with them thoughts about what are the right things to be done, and this is by ensuring that all organizational values are embedded in everyday work practices. Do we embed organizational values? I will talk about the core values of any institution. The question would be, you tell people that we are transparent. You tell people that we have integrity. You tell people that we work in teams. We value teamwork. You tell them we value respect. You tell them we are objective. We are customer oriented. But does that speak to what employees do in that organization? On everyday basis, culture must be lived. It's not just documented, but we must move the organization's culture. That if I'm able to come into the organization for just a day, I can tell whether you are able to live by the core values of the institution, whether you can actually subscribe to those core values. What is the response of employees in terms of handling clients? If I talk about integrity, I talk about transparency. In case I have sent an email which requires prompt response, and I delay to receive my response 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, what does it tell me in terms of the value of customer centricity, in terms of the value of integrity, in terms of the value of transparency? Internal auditors, we are well positioned and we can play a very key role in enabling the board and management to promote ethical conduct throughout an organization. It is very important that internal auditors are well placed. I will talk about the positioning of internal audit function. We are lucky or very grateful to IIA that internal audit is positioned as the third line of defense. And even when you look at the organizational structures, they place us in the third line of defense. Therefore, we can ably promote ethical conduct throughout an organization. We report functionally to the audit committee of the board. We report to the full board. We also report administratively to the chief administrative officers if it is a district. We report to the accounting officers if it is mainstream government. We report to the chief executive officers for administrative and also for purposes of advising on the key improvements which are expected to be done in respect of the ethical conduct. Therefore, internal auditors, this forum should be able to raise our voices, and we see it will probe into what we can do in respect of promoting the ethical conduct of the different employees in our organizations. That is basically a glance about the relevance of this particular area, which we are going to cover. Internal auditing. We talked about internal auditing. This is an independent, and these words I separated them in terms of coloring for purposes of emphasis. Internal auditing is an independent. When you look at most of the standards, look at the performance standards ideally, most of the performance standards talk about independence of the internal auditing function. Before you think of advising management, examine and assess whether you are independent as an auditing function. Secondly, objective. When you look at the attribute standards issued by IIA, they speak about objectivity of the internal audit staff. Are they objective? Assurance and consulting activity. We have been focusing traditionally on assurance, and we have done quite well on assurance as internal auditors. What about on consulting? A culture audit might even take a form of a consultants engagement. And we are designed to add value to the organization. As I was informing you, as we are attending the IIA International Conference in Amsterdam, we are being questioned, auditors, how have you added value? You might have audited assurance processes, you might have audited several departments, but I believe that if you add on the culture audit engagement, the culture consultants engagement, it could be much added value to the organization. We have done well on the aspect of assurance. What about the consulting? When you prepare your annual risk-based audit plan, do we appreciate that that plan, the key deliverables in that plan are influenced by culture and improve the organization's operations? When have we made the recommendations to improve the institutions which we are working for? We are destined as internal auditors to see how the organization's operations can improve. As a point of emphasis, internal auditors, our mission is very simple. Can we enhance and protect organizational value? What protects organizational value? One of the key aspects is the culture. Culture is a very important item or important attribute of organizational value. And we normally protect and enhance organizational value by providing risk-based and objective assurance, advice, and insight. The question would be, is our audit or the audits which you conduct in our respective organizations indeed risk-based? Are they informed by the risk mapping? Are they informed by the risk assessment conducted? Sometimes we sign and approve internal audit plans for different engagements when they are not reflecting risk-based. The audit plan you present to the board for that particular year, is it indeed based on risk? And do we actually take into consideration the current and emerging risks, including risks which are associated with the institution's culture? The next aspect would be that as we position internal audit in this particular, how is the internal audit positioned? We talk about the famous 3 lines of defense model. This is our bread and butter in audit. The governance committee must always be accountable to the stakeholders for organizational oversight. And the board must set a tone for integrity, for leadership, for transparency. And by the way, most of us, we share these thoughts in terms of core values. The board, somebody was probing us to think about, when have you ever conducted a governance audit? Some of us will fear auditing the board. We say, how can I audit the board and issue the opinion? Ideally, you would add much value by looking at the 3 lines of defense. How does the board conduct its business in the boardroom? What is the reflection of the board in respect of integrity, in respect of leadership, in respect of transparency? Look at management. Management must be accountable and to the shareholders and the board, but also management is divided into 2 lines. The first line, which is operational, providing the products, the services to the clients, and actively managing risk. Look at the second line of defense, which is focusing on risk management. Do we have experts, the expertise, the support, the monitoring, and also are we challenging these risk-related matters? How is the second line of defense performing its activities? In most of the cases, you find risk functions. We have not audited them as internal auditors. They do follow-ups, they prepare risk registers, and ideally, some of these risks are not responded to. They become recurring risks year in, year out. One quarter after the other, the risks are being reported, but with no mitigants thought. Internal auditors we should be able to come in as the third line of defense. We provide independent and objective assurance and advise on all matters related to achievement of the objectives. The third line of defense is what we are focusing on in this particular forum. If internal auditors can align, they can communicate, they can coordinate and collaborate with the first line, with the second line of defense, with the board to whom we report, the organizations will be having a robust ethical culture. And lastly, talk about the external assurance providers. When you look at some of the performance standards on coordination of audit services, internal auditors are called upon to collaborate the internal activities with the external assurance providers. When the external auditors come, they would be much interested in appreciating what the organization's culture is. Unfortunately, we might have not conducted the audit. And you find that even the external auditors in government, it is the Office of Auditor General. In the private sector, they are the independent auditors or the audit firms which are engaged. But even if you are an external auditor, it is very important that as you are understanding the entity and its environment under ISA 315 or under ISA 1315, ISA 1315, as an external auditor, you must understand the culture of this organization so that our audit recommendations may be actually implemented. Internal auditors sometimes will raise audit observations which are not implemented. It may be because those observations were not fitting into the current culture of the organization. Look at these ethical principles. As we are telling other people to be ethical, we are also called upon by the Institute of Internal Auditor Global to be able to observe these ethical principles. These are the ethical principles in the IIA Code of Ethics. One, as you call other people to be ethical, are you also ethical by observing the major four ethical principles? One is about integrity. Do internal auditors work with honesty? Are they diligent? Are they responsible? Before you probe into another person's space, as you are pointing the one finger on another person, also they are pointing fingers on internal audit. We are called upon, even in the audit function, we should have a robust ethical culture. We should work with honesty. We should work with diligence. We should be responsible. Objectivity. Do not accept anything that may impair or be presumed to impair your professional judgment. Objectivity of internal auditors. This is a call to us, the audit staff. Are we objective in terms of the recommendations we issue? Are we objective when we are preparing the annual risk-based plan? Or there is some kind of bias in one or the other? How is the culture within internal audit? Before we question other people, we should also have an ethical culture in internal audit functions. Confidentiality. As internal auditors, we are privileged. We can access whatever information we request for. And external auditors, they can also get access to this information. But we are called upon to be prudent in the use and protection of information acquired in the course of performing our duties. Are we prudent? Are we protecting the information which is acquired during performance of our duties? Confidentiality is a very key attribute. And we shall talk about the focus of culture audits. Sometimes they focus on communication of information. Competence is also one of the key aspects. The heads of internal audit who are attending this webinar, Do we perform a resource audit? Do we engage only in those services for which we have only necessary knowledge, skills, and experience? The moment you tell me as a CPA to go and provide assurance on the functionality of an IT system, there is a procurement which is underway of a firewall. Recently, we had a firewall at the Deposit Protection Fund, which was being procured. If the accounting officer requests for a consultancy engagement and you analyze within your team, you don't have the expertise, you don't have the knowledge, the skills and experience to provide or to conduct that assurance engagement, do you say we should try, or you can request for external assistance? The standards allow that on professional competence, we can try to engage. We can try to outsource some of the activities if at all we have assessed our level of competence. Remember, we have a duty to be seen to be actual objective, to have integrity, to have confidentiality, and competence is a very key attribute. Internal auditors, my question this afternoon is that, are we living by these ethical principles in the IIA Code of Ethics, in our audit charters, in the internal audit charters which are approved by the board? We state these ethical principles very well, but let us examine ourselves. Are we living up to these in our audit and non-assurance engagements? We talk about another aspect would be, what is culture? We have looked at internal audit, but it must be buried with the culture of the institution. Even in internal auditors have said we ought to adhere to some ethical principles, and the culture, somebody can define it as basically behaviors. What are the behaviors which are evident in our organizations? What are the habits? Some of the things they start as mere events, but they turn out to be habits, like late coming, rituals, the practices which are known in an institution. What are the current behaviors? When, as an auditor, asked about the behaviors of employees in an institution, values and attitudes, what do we believe in? We believe in excellence. We believe that we should be transparent. We believe that we should focus on the customers. What are our orientations? The issue is, what are we focusing on? What do we value? And what are our attitudes? Somebody says attitude determines altitude. Yes, Stephen, we are getting some echoes, Stephen. Stephen, we are getting some echoes. Yes, Stephen. Somebody centrally to help pass mute, probably.
Afternoon, Stephen.
Yes, Stephen. Yes. I know we can hear a pass to mute. We are getting some echoes. Yes, Stephen. We are getting some echoes. Okay. Okay, I think we are done. Okay. I was emphasizing aspects of culture. Culture has mainly 4 dimensions. Talk about the behaviors of employees in an organization. What are the key habits? What are the key rituals? What are the key practices of an institution? Sometimes institutions are built up on several issues which they should actually fulfill. The values and attitudes of an organization, including its employees. What do employees believe in? As you talk about excellence, we treasure excellence. Do also employees treasure excellence? As you talk about transparency, do employees treasure transparency and respect? Therefore, what are the orientations? Do employees understand why we are in business? We shall talk about the mission, the vision, and the objectives. Attitude is very important. You cannot have an institution where people don't have the right attitude. Somebody said the attitude of a person determines the person's attitude. Attitude determines how far you can go as an institution. You can have very nice strategic plans. You can have very nice strategic initiatives. You can have very nice key performance indicators. But what is the attitude of the employees? Because employees are the ones who are supposed to implement those strategic initiatives. What are some of the relationships and interactions which we have in an institution? The employee engagements they are called upon. When have we ever had a staff engagement with top management? When have you ever had an interaction with the staff in internal audit? When we look at the internal audit function, how often do you meet staff? The director may actually spend a full week minus meeting staff. That speaks a lot in terms of audit supervision and audit execution. What are the current relationships and interactions? What is the key known language in this institution? How do we communicate? How do we adjust to the key changes in organizational processes? If we are thinking of automating, how do we prepare our staff for the change? The environment in which we operate is not static. It is dynamic. If the environment is changing, and for us as the audit function, we are stuck. As an institution, we are stuck in the past. Somebody said it is one fact that change is the only constant in life. And once you don't embrace the change, those are the interactions, those are the changes. These days, we have quite a number of millennials, who are in our internal audit functions. How do we react in terms of the interaction? How do the organizations, how does the HR function respond to the request by the millennials? Even those who are above the age of the millennials, they must be able to embrace the changing environment. What are the roles? Are the roles changing? What is the role of each and every staff on the audit team? And do they understand their roles? It is part of culture. Knowledge and experience. What are the settings? Do we have trainings? What is the skill set? I was asking you on the previous slide, when have you ever conducted a skill set analysis of the internal audit function? When does HR conduct HR planning? When does it plan for its human resources? Is it only when there is a need to recruit? Don't we need to be flexible in terms of HR planning? When do we engage staff? When do we train staff? Is it when we have a new project on board? When do we train staff in internal audit? When did the staff last train? Because the standards require us to only undertake engagements for which we have the skills, the knowledge, and the competences. Currently, there is a lot which is happening. In the financial reporting space, we talk about IFRS 17. And you are in insurance and insurance engagement. You are working, you are head of internal audit of an insurance company. IFRS 17 is being implemented effective 1st January 2013. When did the audit staff who are going to provide assurance on the financial statements, which include the key provisions in IFRS 17, When did they last get knowledge about that standard? We talk about ESG reporting. ESG is all over the globe. When did the staff of internal audit ever get exposed to ESG? Therefore, training is also one of the components. Do organizations have clear training plans? Are the training plans implemented? Therefore, you need to check about all of these particular aspects. Culture includes 4 particular issues: behavior, values and attitudes, the relationships and interactions, the knowledge as well as the experience which people have, which the organization is able to retain over time. What is ethical culture? Decide on what is right and what is wrong. What is a duty and what is good for all of us? What is forbidden in this institution? What is my obligation and what is good for all of us? That is why ethical culture, these are shared perceptions and understanding. The shared perception and understanding among the employees of what is and is not acceptable behavior, the norms, the practices, the procedures in an organization, the shared perceptions, the shared understanding. Ask yourself after this engagement, do we have a shared perception in an organization? Do we have a common understanding of integrity in this organization? Do we have a common understanding of the performance appraisal templates in this organization? Some entities are implementing the balance scorecard. Do we have a shared understanding of the balance scorecard? Do we have a shared understanding of time management in this institution? If not that, then we have not yet built an ethical culture. Do employees have a shared perception and understanding of what is acceptable behavior? What are the acceptable norms? What are the acceptable procedures and practices in an organization? What do we exist for and how are things done in this institution? The drivers of ethical culture are mainly 3. Ethical leadership by the board and senior management. We cannot talk about culture and we hide away the board. The board must set the tone at the top for good governance. Senior management, you should live an exemplary life, because normally they said the fish rots from the head. If the board and senior management are not able to set the tone for ethical leadership, how do you expect your staff to actually behave ethically? The core ethical values. I have made some research and most of our institutions, they cherish these items in red. Most institutions, they say we are transparent. Most of them, they say we have integrity. Most of them, they say we have teamwork. Even in audit function, we have respect. We cherish respect. We cherish accountability. Excellence. We value customers. There is customer centricity in our operations. There is equity. Ask yourself, are we really practicing equity? I'm going to talk about the ethical risks. Most of these things are written on paper. It is upon us as auditors to go an extra mile and confirm whether organizations and employees are living up to these core values. The core values are very nice. Whenever you enter an institution, you see them pinned around in almost every office. But are we living up to these core values? They are very soft skills. They are soft aspects of an organization. But as I said, these cultural values, these ethical values can shape an organization. They can even result into diminution of the organization's value. Ethics programs. Do we have a program which is implemented to ensure compliance with applicable laws and regulations? When have our employees last trained? I talked about training, compliance. The laws are changing year by year. Recently, the president assented to an amendment of the Financial Institutions Act. Recently, there were amendments in the Income Tax Act. They are introducing Islamic banking in Uganda. The law was assented to by the president. What are we doing if the traditional banking is now going to compete for the same clients with the Islamic banking products? What is the plan? Do we have a strategy to see that we can comply? Fairness as well as trust. Most of the employees are not trusted. In some institutions, you find that there is no fairness. If you are actually handling appraisals with their fairness, if you're allocating the budget across the institutions, in most cases, you find the internal audit getting the smallest share. I don't know why up to now. Fairness, because even internal auditors need to go for capacity building. But the organization may say when auditors train, then they may become a burden because they will be sharp and they will put us to task. In that dilemma, we may not implement a very nice ethical culture. The drivers are mainly three: ethical leadership, the core ethical values, and we should implement an ethics program, which I will speak to shortly. What is the effect of unethical culture? The ethical culture determines how employees communicate and interact. Do we have interactions in an institution? Because some decisions need to be made across departments. But you enter an organization when the head of finance makes a decision without consulting head investments. Head internal audit goes to shed an audit without communicating to the other head of department. How do people communicate and interact? Guiding the day-to-day working relationships. As internal audit, what are our day-to-day working relationships? Do we have friction even within the audit team? Which kind of culture is that? Do we have fractions in an organization? Do we have cordial working relationships with our audit clients? Sometimes we are not liked. That is known because you tell the people what they don't want to hear. They only want to hear the good news. Yet internal audit, you are not communicating the good news. These days we have improved the audit reports that we can even highlight the key significant achievements. But most of our report, the bigger section is concentrating on the negative. How have we streamlined the working relationships with our clients? The ethical culture determines what is appropriate behavior in an organization. If I come to your institution and I ask, what is the appropriate behavior in this institution? Can an employee, an officer, not a head of department, describe to me the organizational culture? Determining how power and status are allocated within an organization. There are organizations which we have seen where there is a lot of power distance. A lot of power distance. That even a staff comes to your office as a head of department when the staff's heart is pumping. He doesn't know how to actually introduce himself or what to say. There is a lot of power distance in some of the organizations. How is the power and the status allocated? Some people are seen to be bigger than the others. Yet actually, they are the ones who give you deliverables. The power and the status, how are these allocated? Sometimes there is a lot of power distance, which is uncalled for, because all of us, we are working to pursue the same strategy. Determines how people relate with one another. It is very important that our interaction and relationships will finally shape the overall corporate performance. How do people relate with one another within internal audit and outside the internal audit? What is the relationship between the different departments and the internal audit? Can we relate freely? For the consulting arm of internal audit, we need the managers, the chief executive officer, the board of directors to request. How do we relate with the board as internal audit? What is the ethical culture there? Ethical culture can determine how we even relate with the CEO. How does the head of internal audit relate with the chairperson of the audit committee of the board, especially on professional grounds? These are key considerations to look at. What are the current key ethical risks in most of our institutions? And these ones, you need to think about them after this engagement. Starting with this engagement, think about whether your institution, there are these ethical issues. One is discrimination based on age, based on the gender, based on the race, based on religion and disability. If you are allocating training opportunities, don't we discriminate in the institution? Even in internal audit, how do you allocate training opportunities? Are you fair? Discrimination, sometimes it is prevalent in our operations as internal audit. Harassment, it may be verbal harassment, it may be sexual abuse, it may be teasing, it may be bullying. There are those staff who think that they are more important than anybody else in an institution. There are those who think that they are more important than others. They do tease and bully other people. They know that they are seniors. They have been around, but sometimes they don't appreciate that there will be a day when they are no longer around. They harass others. Teasing and bullying, it didn't stop only in senior 6, senior 1, no. Some employees of yours are bullied, others are teased, others are sexually harassed. Others are verbally harassed. Where is internal audit in all that process? Creative accounting is happening, especially when people are making provisions. IFRS 9 ECLs. How is the calculation of the ECL? How is the IFRS 9 model for computing ECL? When it comes to leases, when it comes to insurance contracts, how are we monitoring as internal audit to ensure that there is no creative accounting? The health and safety related concerns. How is the working environment like? I cannot sit in a very dirty working environment and you expect me to deliver. I cannot sit in a very hot working environment and you expect me to deliver. Are the working conditions convenient? Are they conducive to the organization and the staff? Internal audit, when have we ever reviewed the safety and health and safety in our audit processes? Abuse of office and the authority. Most of the people, or some people, you have heard of instances of corruption, abuse of office, embezzlement of public funds. You have heard about nepotism and favoritism. I bring in somebody because it's my sister. I bring in somebody because it's my cousin without the qualifications. Favoritism. How do you allocate opportunities to your staff? You prefer some people as compared to others. By the way, we are the same. We are the same. deprivation of personal data privacy. Underneath you, there is the Personal Data Protection Office, and there is the National Data Protection and Privacy Act. How do we use personal data on employees? How is the culture? Can we easily disseminate personal data? Who has access to this personal data? Can it easily be communicated and disseminated? How is HR handling personal data? Have we ever probed ourselves in IT? What security controls are there in the systems to deter and protect the company as well as personal data from potential misuse by our staff? Very, very important in this case. Corporate espionage. There is what we call information leakage. Whatever you have had as an organization, ideally that information is out in the papers. Is that our culture? There is a lot of information leakage. You find the memo on the exact headed paper, but you signed it, the ED signed it at 11, but the exact memo with the right signatories, it is in the papers out there by midday. You ask yourself, who has leaked this information? It's because of culture. Non-compliance with applicable laws and regulations. If you talk about filing tax returns, filing NSSF, declarations, all those are very important. To the auditors, are we complying with our standards? The IIS standards on the professional conduct of internal audit. We are lucky to have the IPPF. Do you have the IPPF, and are you able to comply with the key provisions in those standards? Some of these, as I said, we are looking at enabling the entire institution or our organizations to improve and build robust institutional cultures. But even us as audit, we reflect upon our conduct. Are we complying with the IPPF? If you talk about the audit charter, are you complying with the provisions in the audit charter? Are you reporting functionally to the board? When you claim to be independent, is the function really independent? Is the function having staff who are objective? Do they comply with all the laws? Deprivation of company information, corporate espionage. Information is accessed by audit, but where does it end? Abuse of office, nepotism, favoritism. These are key issues to note, and we can only talk about them in such an engagement when we are interacting as professionals to check ourselves how we are moving in this particular area. The next aspect to look at, the solution to all of these ethical issues or risks, is establishing an ethics program. And the ethics program requires us that we should have top management commitment and involvement. Top management is delegated responsibility by the board. Can we have management which is committed and involved in every decision? Can we have ethics codes and policies? The codes of conduct must be in place. Ethics training, when have employees, when did they last train on ethical related issues, health and safety issues? When have we ever had an engagement on core values? Some institutions, they have very nice core values, but you ask an employee and he cannot tell you the meaning of integrity. What do we mean when we say we are objective? What do we mean when we say we have a high level of confidentiality? All of these aspects are very important. High level ethics personnel. Who is in charge of inculcating ethics within an organization? If it is in terms of whistleblowing, do we have any procedures on whistleblowing? How is the communication done? All organizational policies are approved. but they have never been communicated to the staff. How do you expect the staff to comply? Whatever policy the board approves, you shelve it. How can you expect me to comply as a staff when you haven't communicated? Ethical auditing. The audits which are conducted, when have we ever audited ethics? It is upon us to think about. Ethics helpline and hotline. If there is anybody who is aggrieved on ethics-related matters, where does the person report? What is the reporting structure? Whistleblowing procedures and protection. Do we protect whistleblowers? And do we have a whistleblowers policy to protect them? How do we institute disciplinary measures against people who have acted unethically? If they have acted unethically, how do we ensure that they are properly disciplined? Inclusion of ethical conduct in the evaluation of employee performance. When you are doing the annual performance appraisal, besides the technical aspects, are there behavioral competences, including aspects checking on ethical issues? Can supervisors give you comfort about the integrity of the employee, about the aspects about confidentiality of an employee? Respect is very key, because they normally say self-respect is the most important kind of respect. Respect is key. How do you expect me to work with an employee when I'm a supervisor, but I'm not respected? Therefore, we can include the ethical conduct in the evaluation of employee performance. What are the benefits of a robust ethical cultures we are planning to finalize? Improve the governance processes. We are able to see them. If we can work on this, enhance transparency and accountability for the resources of the organization. Better corporate reputation is very key, and the corporate image. This would be improved. Improved decision making. As long as we have a very good culture, the decision making will not be a hassle. It will be improved. The decision making process will be smooth. Compliance with applicable laws and regulations. The moment people have been trained on ethics, it will not take a while when they need to comply with laws and regulations, as well as international standards. Improve the organization of financial performance. The performance of the institution will obviously improve, and effective utilization of resources. These same points can be reflected in an audit function. If you build a robust ethical culture within an audit function, you'll find your staff when they can easily make decisions. When the reputation of the audit function is a better one than it was before, there would be more accountability for the time spent on the different audit engagements. Decision making will be easy. We shall comply with the IIA standards. I understand that next year we are getting a set of new standards from IIA Global. They are coming on board. Please prepare your staff to appreciate the new standards. Improve the organization of financial performance. Even the deliverables of internal audit will be visible the moment you build a very good, robust culture, and we shall effectively make use of the available audit resources, the personnel, as well as any other systems. What are the roles of management and the board? Very, very important. What are the roles? In all of this, we are looking at building the ethical culture as we conclude, basically. ISO issued a standard, ISO 37,000 last year, on governance of organizations. And this standard is emphasizing that the governing body shall lead organization ethically. and effectively and ensure that such leadership shall be cascaded throughout the organization. ISO 37000 is quite a new standard, providing guidance on governance aspects. The governing body should lead the organization ethically and effectively, but not to compromise the governing board. It should also cascade down the leadership throughout the organization. The same ISO 37000 requires the governing board to oversee the performance of an organization, to see that the organization meets the governing body's intentions and expectations of the organization, the ethical behavior, very important, and compliance obligations. I understand this engagement might have body members on board. We might have body members who are attending this engagement. You are called upon to be at the center of actually implementing and establishing a robust ethical culture. Body members, kindly, ISO 37000. It requires you to lead the organizations ethically and effectively. You should ensure that such leadership is throughout the organization. And what are the key responsibilities which you can pick from here? Body members and management, especially the body members. You set the tone at the top for exemplary leadership. You oversee or you provide oversight in relation to governance processes, risk management practices, and internal controls. Management and the board should promote good corporate governance in an institution. Formulation of organizational policies and procedures. It is management to set the tone on which we should develop organizational policies. But it's beyond developing policies. You must communicate them. What are the procedures in terms of financial reporting? What are the policies in terms of financial reporting? Do we have IT policies? Do we have policies in communication? Do we have policies in investments? What is the investment policy of this institution? We must formulate policies across the different departments, upholding strong ethical values. We normally lead by example. You don't normally lead when you don't walk the talk. It's better, somebody said that actions speak louder than the words. We may talk about ethical values, and actually we don't live by them. Do we uphold these ethical values as the board, as the senior management, and lastly, establishment of the ethics program? Do we have mechanisms, for instance, to report unethical behavior? Management and the board, are employees free? Do they feel free to release any of the issues where they have doubts? Are they able to communicate freely? What is the communication structure like in an institution? Establishment of the ethics program is also one of the key issues that management needs to work on. The role of internal audit function, very important. Standard 2110, it requires the internal audit activity must evaluate the design, implementation, and effectiveness of the organization's ethics-related objectives, programs, and activities. Therefore, when you perform a culture audit, you are not actually going beyond your mandate. You are actually fulfilling the requirements of standard 2110, 2110, part A1. Standard 2060 requires the chief audit executive to report periodically to senior management and the board on the internal audit activities conformance with the code of ethics and the standards. as I was probing you to think about our functions as internal auditors, are our functions living by the code of ethics? Are they adhering to the standards? And the reporting should also include significant risk and control issues, including fraud risk, governance issues, other matters that require attention of senior management and the board. You must report periodically. I understand most of the audit functions, internal functions, report on a quarterly basis to the board. You report on a quarterly basis to the board. It is very, very important that we must be able to identify significant risks and control issues, including the risk of fraud. Fraud is unethical. Governance issues and other matters must also be talked about. But what I want you to go, and this is a takeaway from me, is that you should be able to schedule a culture audit. And the culture audit is a process of review that investigates the health of the organization's culture. What is the health status of your culture as an organization? Do we live by what we say or we don't? Some policy provisions are not implemented, and the culture audits are conducted to enable an organization gauge whether its culture is allowing them to reach their strategic goals. Is our culture hindering us to achieve those strategic goals and objectives, or it is actually enabling us? Culture is the foundation of governance, of risk management, and implementation of internal controls. When you are scheduling the culture audit, you should provide for 3 stages, which you normally go through. Involve a planning phase, include the fieldwork stage, and the reporting phase. You report on the culture. And if I am the body member of the institution and you bring a report on organizational culture, I will be able to listen, because if it has never been audited, it is high time. As I told you, in Amsterdam, they were engaging us. They were calling us to schedule culture audits. Can we know the culture of these institutions where we work? Plan, do field work, and then report to the board as well as senior management. What is the focus of a culture audit? Vision, mission, the goals and objectives of the organization. These are very key areas. I outlined about 7 areas. Vision, mission, goals and objectives. Appreciate whether these goals and objectives are well aligned. What is the mission? What is the vision of the organization? Focus on the core values of the institution. Focus on its leadership. Leadership is very key. Governance audits can also be scheduled to look at leadership only. Look at the personnel behavior is normally individualistic, meaning look at the personnel of the institution. What are the operations of the institutions and the current policies? Very nice policies are written, but it is difficult to comply with them. Do organizations actually have policies which they comply with? Communication is very key. What is the culture of this institution in terms of communication? What is the response time? The average response time to employee feedback. What is the average response time to external client feedback? Some entities are operating in very, very sensitive areas that if you directly respond, and these days we have social media, we have digital platforms, what is the communication policy talking about? The workplace environment. How is the workplace environment like in that institution? Culture audit, recognition and rewards. How is the reward system structured? Employees annually they are appraised. How do we recognize superior performance? How do we reward the superior performance, that performance which is not just meeting expectations, but actually it is performing beyond what we expected? The information to look out for is simple: organizational history and the background. Understand the organization. Internal auditors, do we understand the organization? When they talk about business acumen, you must have knowledge about the institution in which you are working, the mission, the vision statements, and the core values of the organization. It's information to review. The mission, the vision statements, and core values of the industry peers. I am looking at this institution in the finance sector. I'm looking at commercial bank X and commercial bank Y. They are in the same industry. Can I look at the vision and the mission of other entities? The statement about the organization's goals and objectives. Very, very important that you must understand what goals are we looking at in terms of realizing. And some of the issues about culture will speak to the goals which we set, will speak to the objectives which we set, and whether we realize them or not. The key organizational strategic initiatives, the code of ethics and conduct, very important information to review. And I'm doing this in the case when you are planning, when you are executing the culture audit, you need to look at these aspects. The human resources policies and procedures. What is the policy on hiring employees, on termination, on retention? Sometimes we may hire employees not following the laid down procedures. What happens? Internal audit, you are part of the interviews. And an entity is actually hiring employees contrary to the provisions in the HR policies. It is us to raise up and talk. Very, very important. Our president, the past president of IIA, was encouraging us one time that if we see something which is going wrong, let us not just keep quiet. I can look at the hiring, termination, and retention trends, the wage and the pay equity across demographics. How is the pay structured on entry into the organization? How are the wages paid? Is there equity in terms of the pay? People at the same rank receive completely different salaries. And internal audit, we are very comfortable. These people are in the same position, they have the same qualifications. Internal auditors, it may be time that we look at this. Employee performance appraisal metrics, very important. Employees, how are they appraised? The metrics, does an employee know about the metric at the beginning of the year? Is the metric fair enough to the employee to allow for the reward of superb performance? Responses to incidents. Look at the responses. Incident reporting is one of the key aspects. Issues of data breaches. Issues of cyber attacks. When we are attacked one time, how was the response? You can be able to pick out some of the critical issues in there. What are the whistleblowing arrangements at hand? And how have we handled any previous fraud cases? This will speak to organization's culture. They must speak to what the organization values and what it doesn't actually value. As I conclude, these are very important inspirational tips which I wanted to share with you. And they have been written. You can access them. But somebody once said the importance of culture, that the culture, as Peter Drucker said, culture eats a strategy for breakfast, for lunch and dinner. as internal auditors, as organizations, we need to work on culture. When we don't work on culture, strategy will be ate at breakfast, at lunch, and dinner. When you don't have culture, there is no strategy. In short, secondly, customers will never love a company until the employees love it first. Very, very important. You cannot think of loving customers when you hate your employees. How do you engage with the employees? You cannot say you love more the customers and you hate your employees who interface with them. It speaks to recognition and remuneration. Thirdly, shaping your culture is more than half done when you hire your team. We shouldn't complain about the employees whom we hired. We can mold those employees and educate them about our intended culture. It is never out of hand. On the date when you get new employees, can we start instilling our culture from the word go? Can employees start appreciating these concepts as early as possible? Shaping your culture is more than half done when you hire your team in internal audit. Don't say, I cannot manage this team. No, you can manage them. Number 4, hire great people and give them freedom to be awesome. Hire great people. You have hired the employees, but you have not given them freedom. Some of the organization's employees are not trusted. Can you trust your employees in the audit function? You trust them, let them burn their fingers. Let them make mistakes. Assign them some of the new engagements like auditing culture. Let them give you a deliverable and guide them. Supervise the engagement. You coach them. Finally, they will become greater people. Give them freedom to be awesome. Give them chance. But sometimes an employee is assigned to routine audits. No, let them test the deep waters. Third last, good leadership in internal audit requires that you surround yourself with people of diverse perspectives who can disagree with you. They disagree with you without fearing retaliation. Most of the superiors, they actually retaliate. People have very nice perspectives. They have very nice opinions. But leadership requires that we must be respected because we have been around. It is okay, you have been around, but I have a perspective. Is it possible? Is it possible that we disagree? I may make a proposal, you make your proposal, and we disagree technically without retaliation. When you retaliate, then you are doing a disservice. Next time I know, my boss will not accept anything. And second last, when people are financially invested, they want a return. When people are emotionally invested, they want to contribute something. Ensure that all employees of the organization are not looking up to the payday. No. Some organizations have staff who are financially invested. They just want a return. Can you move away from financial investment to emotional investment? When people are emotionally invested, they want to contribute towards your performance as the institution. Some employees are looking at when are we getting our salary, and that is the business. Lastly, employee engagement arises out of culture, not the other way around. When you want to engage employees in audit, it is just part of the culture to engage your staff. It is part of the culture for the organization to engage its staff. It's not ideally that culture, once you work on culture, employees will engage with you. No, it is basically employee engagement first. Employee engagement arising out of culture, very, very important. Therefore, your culture first and employees will engage with you. Otherwise, I want to thank you for listening to me. That is the presentation to preempt our discussion. Feel free to chip in any questions, any comments are welcome. We thank you for listening to us and thank you for sparing time to log into this particular webinar. And welcome any questions and comments at this time. Thank you, and may the good Lord bless you.
Thank you, Samuel, for that wonderful presentation. We are really delighted to have had you today. In the Q&A, I can see 15 questions so far. Allow me, I'm going to be reading 5. So yes. You'll be answering in installments.
Yes.
Now, the first 5, we have Frank Chiberu, who's saying, how does internal audit support procurement and supply chain management? Then we have Chimba Feshar is saying, how do internal audit practices of GRC affect organizational performance, and on which parameters, to be specific, kindly highlight on this? Then we have Rashid Anamirim. What's the impact of auditors' independence on audit quality? And then we have Peter Jada. He says, what will you say when internal auditors become part of the management by passing procedural payments simply because they are part of the beneficiaries? You may first answer those ones.
Okay, very, very nice. That last one was an interesting question. Frank Chiberu is saying, how does internal audit support procurement and supply chain management? Very important. We have had the situations where we have conducted procurement audits. We cannot shy away from the fact that procurement is a very crucial role in most of the organizations. Therefore, conduct procurement audits. These procurement audits will be able to enable the organization identify the key areas of weaknesses. But to start with, if there is no procurement manual, there are no procurement procedures that should be put in place, but internal audit can advise on some of the ability of those procedures to meet our intended objectives. Therefore, internal audit can support procurement and supply chain management by ensuring that you conduct procurement audits. And if you have not audited procurement, then you are not doing the full scope audit of the payments process, because under finance, we normally pay. But all these payments originate from procurement, and you should be able to review the procurement process right from initiation up to contract management. Chimba Fisher is saying, how does internal audit practices of GRC affect organizational performance? Very, very important. And on which parameters to be what? To be specific. The governance practices, risk and internal control mechanisms are very clear. And as I've highlighted, internal audit practices will impact performance of the institution, especially on aspects to deal with how do we communicate. Secondly, how do we provide accountability? Number 3, how do we make decisions as an institution? And then number 4, how do we implement the best practices in that organization? Internal auditors, we can add the much needed value in those particular areas. Rashida is saying, what is the impact of auditors' independence on audit quality? Auditors' independence as well as objectivity, because when you read the professional standards for the practice of internal audit, Independence is basically the institutional or the functional responsibility. But auditors, once they are independent, they will be able to give us the vivid audit findings. And the recommendations will be objective. They will not be biased in any way. Audit quality is compromised. We may not be able to achieve the audit objectives which were set at audit planning the moment the auditors are not independent, the moment the auditors are not objective, Rashida. Peter Jada is saying, what will you say when internal auditors become part of the management by passing unprocedural payments simply because they are part of the beneficiaries? This is basically speaking to pre-audits. Gone are the days because ideally, you must be seen to be objective, to be independent. This will expose you to self-review threats because I have passed a payment which didn't follow the stupid procedures and I'm auditing the same. Won't I be conflicted in some way? And I cannot review payments which are okayed. Therefore, this shouldn't happen. And it speaks to the ethical culture of an institution. Somebody is saying, anonymous attendee, those are the questions, the five questions, Stephen. Should I continue with the rest? Yes, Stephen. Should I continue with the rest?
Somewhere you can go on.
Very nice.
Okay.
Anonymous attendee is saying, can you please share the sample audit report that has both negative and positive appraisal of the audit, because we still use the format of reporting by what? By exception. It is very important that in the contemporary audit reporting environment, you can first acknowledge some of the key achievements which have been made. It's not that you are going to outline everything which has been done, but the significant audit engagements. What have been the salient audit achievements or the salient achievements made by the auditable area? It is very important that as we are reporting, we should be able to acknowledge efforts which management is undertaking. And that is a form of balanced reporting, which is encouraged by the different institutions. There is a question there, is there an obligation for the internal auditor to prepare financial reports? No. What we are saying, except if these are audit reports. If you talk about financial statements, the auditor is delegated responsibility to review those financial statements. You cannot prepare financial reports and then you audit them. It is against our attribute or core value of actually objectivity. There is a need to align the ethical culture to corporate strategy throughout all of the levels of strategy to ensure that ethical culture is appreciated holistically. This is a comment from Simon Okero Peter. It is a very vivid comment. There is a need to align culture. As I concluded, Peter Druck said, culture eats a strategy for breakfast, for lunch and dinner. We should align culture with the strategy. Diana Akule is saying, can the accountant perform internal function in the case of limited what? Limited resources? The accountant, it depends on the positioning of the accountant. Is the accountant part of management? Then it poses as an issue of conflict of interest and lack of objectivity. For that matter, the accountant cannot audit the same processes which he has been responsible for. Quite often, senior management, Albert Otiti, that quite often the senior management is resistant to the internal audit report on culture management. What can we do to convince them to accept? I can even tell you that often management can refute and resist some of the findings. It is about one, how have we presented the findings? And have we supported the findings with appropriate evidence to that effect? Therefore, Albert, you convince management on how to appreciate these audit findings. I've ever attended an engagement in Mombasa where somebody was talking about high impact audit reporting. When you are reporting and you are recognizing the impact and the efforts made by management, what is the impact of this observation? Clearly, management will disagree with the impact. Let them give you the impact. But the recommendation is reserved for the auditor. Can you make the recommendations and sell them to management? They will appreciate the added value. Diana is saying, what are some of the audit procedures used when performing the culture audit? There are quite a number of procedures, but as I said, there are key focus areas. Talk about aspects of governance. Talk about aspects of focus in a culture audit. We talked about some aspects which are very, very important. If I could be able to look at these particular areas. We talk about the mission, vision, goals and objectives, the core values, the leadership, the personnel, the issues about the policies, communication of information. You can design very many audit procedures. And you could have an audit plan for performing the culture what? The culture audit. Anonymous attendees say, can a culture audit be amalgamated into other audits such as corporate governance audit, HR audit, risk and the compliance audit? Because as an independent audit, it may be hard to execute. True, you can be able to audit some components of culture together with other audits. You can. But if you want to bring a new blood in the audit reporting structure, you can conduct a separate culture audit. But still, culture aspects can be audited alongside when you're looking at a governance audit, an HR audit, an audit of compliance and risk. You can incorporate some of the culture aspects in there. Anonymous attendees saying, how can a culture audit be executed without causing enmity among a staff, especially management, since this is touching people's egos and well-being? Very nice. You can use a methodology of questionnaires. The questionnaires which are anonymous. What you do, you prepare very nice questionnaires and you get feedback. It may be a focus group. It may be that we actually have a one-on-one interaction with the staff. But like it or not, a culture audit will change an organization. I need to look at the end result, which is a very, very important result, that culture audits will finally improve the organization's performance. Whether it causes enmity, and by the way, somebody told me that people will not like you for speaking the good, they will not like you for speaking the bad. Therefore, what will they like you for as audit? Can you tell them the bad news? I know they want the good news only the good news. Unfortunately, as auditors, we tell you where we are like doctors. The doctors tell you what you don't want to hear, that you know you need a diagnosis, you need an operation. Like it or not, this is what you need to do. Lisa is saying it has been a good one. Okay, Jim, then thank you. And the other questions, this is Charles Ochan, very insightful. Okay. Okay, thanks for the ethical couch. What is dividing internal auditors? They are part of the institution, though they operate independently. External auditors are outside the organization. Somebody is talking about what ISA governs culture what? Culture audits. When you are looking at basically issues of fraud, when you look at ISA 240, external auditors are called upon to be mindful about all the risks which may actually be resulting into unethical conduct like fraud. Therefore, ISA 240, the auditor's responsibilities in relation to fraud is looking at basically those particular cultural issues and ethical issues. How can such ideas be implemented in an organization like an NGO, Aaron Chiria? How can these ideas be implemented in an NGO? An NGO, given that its mandate is basically non-profit, we can implement the same. It's only that as auditors, we have not probed into the culture of these institutions. But I encourage you, Aaron, based on what you have shared, probe into the institution's culture. What are the things which are done? And are they ethical? Are they the things which are supposed to be done? Rose is saying, thank you, CPA Agure, but I'm requesting you to help me on how to build my independence in internal auditing, especially when I'm an employee in the same company. Very important. We must build some lines on what you can do and what you can't do. Very important. When you look at basically the IIS standards, when you look at most of the frameworks on internal controls, they tell you what the auditor must do and what auditors cannot do. Therefore, align yourself, understand that you cannot provide assurance on any assignments for which you have been engaged in. In private institutions, John Mary Ategeka is saying, in private institutions, whereas we work, there is a lot of conflict, especially with owners of the entity. What should the auditors do? The only solution is sensitization. You are actually working on behalf of the owners. We said one of the key aspects in the mission of internal audit, you exist to enhance and protect organizational value. Organizational value. How can internal audit be of use to an NGO? Internal audit, as we highlighted in the definition, we exist as an independent and objective assurance and consulting activity. You can still provide consulting engagements as well as audit engagements. Sylvia Namtev is saying, how can internal audit help a company in building systems? Advisory. This goes to advisory. Somebody who is in charge of IT audits, you advise the company. Look at the IT strategic plan of the organization. That is the starting point, Sylvia. Does the organization have an IT? If these are automated systems, do we have an IT strategic plan? If they are automated systems, how have we phased out the rollout of these plans? Therefore, it is very important that audit, even in the process of procuring these systems, we can engage and provide assurance at the different stages of the procurement process. This is Ayele Kremesia is saying, what are the ethical dilemmas of internal auditors in public sector? And how can they be resolved? Yes, some of the issues relating to public sector, there are quite a number of ethical dilemmas in respect of internal audit, starting from the core values of the institutions, looking at the leadership of the institutions, ethical dilemmas. The leaders may not walk when they talk. What do you do as audit in such cases? That is why Christopher is saying the relationship between internal and other departments like finance is for sure healthy. by these audit departments are seen to treat looking for bad news. How can this business or this relationship be improved? It is sensitization. When you have an audit engagement, you know there is what we call an expectation gap. People think that auditors are doing A when actually auditors are doing B. Sensitization. In our entry meetings, can we state clearly what we exist to do to avoid those potential misconceptions? Therefore, Christopher, can we work on sensitization so that people understand we are not witch-hunting anybody, we exist to enhance and protect organizational value? Helen is saying in the case where auditors do not follow their code of ethics, what is supposed to be done? Disciplinary measures. You can warn them, you can coach them, you can mentor them, especially you can mentor those auditors. And James is saying also, how can internal audit work together with risk? How can internal audit work together with the risk department to add value? Where do we draw the line in the scope of the two departments? Very nice question here, James. We are saying in internal audit, there is what we call a modern approach to providing assurance. It is a contemporary approach. It is called combined assurance. Internal audit and risk management. First of all, risk management is the second line of defense. Internal audit is the third line, meaning the line is already drawn. Internal audit can even provide assurance on the activities of the risk function, which is not the case for risk. Therefore, risk must be able to carry out the aspects involving risk assessment at 31,000. What is your auditors? They need to know that change, dynamics, we need an ethical culture in audit. If you are an internal auditor, you are not an external. And what is your focus? You don't focus on only financial statements. How can you build cordial working relationships? These are issues which need to be worked on, because you may behave as external when you are actually an internal auditor. Can you work on the relationship with the management? Because as compared to the external auditor, who will come for 1 month and go away, for you are almost a permanent staff. On a day-to-day basis, you interact with management, and also the way we report should also change and speak to that fact. Robin is saying, thank you so much for the information shared. How best can internal audit functions contribute fully in hospitality industry, where management believes that internal auditor is part of a management? If at all they think you are part of management and there is no audit committee at board level. Very, very important. I've shared insights on ISO 37000, a standard providing guidance on governance. You cannot say we have a body without an audit committee. Where does internal audit report? Even the IIS standards stipulate our functional and administrative reporting. I think the best way would speak to the institution's culture. Can we advise the board and senior management on how the reporting line of internal audit can be streamlined? How can you advise an internal auditor who sometimes board members expect to perform accounts work when the accountant is absent? Nabuye Maria, very nice question. But please, internal audit is not the same as accounting. We must draw the line, and it goes back to ethical culture. If you prepare financial statements and you come again, you audit them, why don't we build probably the Chinese walls? Why don't we rotate the roles. In some cases, you find it is not prudent. It is not prudent to actually have that. Jim then is saying, please comment on the practice of internal auditors drafting organizational policies. This is not permissible. It's not permissible, and it should not be, because you are the one who is going to come and audit. You are the one who is going to include this in your audit copy. Therefore, it shouldn't happen at any point in time. Some clarity in reference to Standard 2060. Does it require the Chief Audit Executive to report on the code of ethics of the organization or the audit team? It is basically the code of ethics of the audit team, not the entire organization. That is Standard 2060. Ivan Mwesi is saying, considering system audits, is the auditor's responsibility to conduct root cause analysis? Yes, root cause analysis is very important, and it is conducted in every audit. We normally ask ourselves the why. Why? The moment you ask yourself 5 whys, then you are able to get the root cause analysis, especially when we need an audit observation to have that component of the cause. The cause is very important in every audit observation, because our audit recommendations must be aligned to the cause. And if the auditor does not understand the cause, it would mean that he may not be able to advise on some of those key recommendations. Edith is saying, how do private organizations enhance integrity? Integrity talks about honesty. Edina Twaire. Integrity talks about integrity, honesty, diligence, and responsibility. These are personal initiatives, and at personal level, you must cherish them before even we look at the institution at large. How can internal auditing function be important in a circle kind of business?
Sam.
Richard Mutebi, there are 3 areas of focus. Even if it is a circle, internal audit can provide added value on governance processes, risk management practices, and internal controls. That is why I started by looking at the role of internal audit through our mission as well as the mandate. Yes, Stephen, is there any?
Yes, Sam,
Yes.
we are only left with 4 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm going to implore you to take on only 2 questions, and then you give your closing remarks.
They are around 18, but what are the 2 questions? The 2 questions, what kind of reports are made by internal audit? Do they make opinions? No. Internal auditors, they don't give opinions. Those are external auditors, Abdallah. And internal auditors, what do? They give us the level of assurance. They don't express opinions. Audit opinions are expressed by external auditors with reference to ISA 700 up to ISA 705. Audit opinions are issued by external auditors. And then how can internal auditors improve quality in external audit firms? How can internal auditors improve quality in external audit firms? That's not very clear, because internal auditors, our work is to coordinate with the external audit firms, to liaise with them when they are performing their audit engagements. And then Charles is saying, how can I ensure my work is aligned to the strategic objectives of the organization in absence of the internal audit charter and the sound governance systems? Charles, this is the internal audit prison, DRA. You cannot have an internal audit engagement. You cannot say we have an audit function without the internal audit charter. These are key strategic documents. You cannot say we are doing audit without an audit manual. You cannot say we are doing audits without the annual risk-based audit plan. You cannot say we are doing an audit without the audit plan for that engagement. Therefore, those are some of the issues which are basic. Internal audit charter should be the first document. And please try to get ways of how you can get the charter. IIA has even given us a template for the model charter. There is a model internal audit what? Audit charter. I like these questions. There are quite many, but the challenge is that I may not finish them today, but want to appreciate those who asked some questions. Gloria, thank you, Robin. We see Stephen here, we see Daphne, we see Helen, we see Tony, we see Mustafa, we see Chiyimba, we see James, we see Edward, Livingstone, Angela, Thaddeus, Chiyemba, all of these, and Rosemary. We want to thank you for basically those questions, but you can engage in private chats over time. And for those who have the challenges, let us use the Institute of Certified Public Accountants. Let us use the Institute. The Institute is well equipped. The Institute is well equipped to provide the necessary guidance. The Institute can assist where you are facing challenges. The good thing is that we have Icpau with us. And on any of the challenges which you are facing, can we try to liaise with the what? With the Institute on these particular engagements. That is it, Stephen. I don't know whether I should give my parting thoughts and then we look at how we can close this.
Yes, Samuel, give your parting shots. Yes.
Okay. Very, very nice. Thank you so much, Secretariat. Thank you for coordinating this. The Education Directorate, I see the Director Education, Icpau. I see also Veronica. Thank you for moderating this. Thank you, the session chair, for sharing this session. Thank you, the participants. One of the key aspects which I want us to reflect on, let us think about how organizational culture impacts our organization. I will emphasize some keywords which were said by Peter Drucker. Let us not allow organizational strategy to be ate by culture. Culture is a very important element of every organization. And as we provide assurance on governance processes, risk management practices, internal controls, can we go an extra mile and look at institutional culture? Culture can eat strategy. Some organizations may actually be moving backwards. And one of the key issues is about culture. I have also appreciated that so many institutions may be facing challenges in terms of segregating and distinguishing clearly the internal audit mandate against the other activities of the organization. It is my request that you liaise with the Institute, and it starts with the sensitization of the board. The Institute can organize experienced people to come and sensitize management and the board. It is our institute. Let us liaise with the Institute. They can bring somebody, or they can recommend to you somebody who can come and speak with top management and the board. And let us also comply with the code, the principles in the code of conduct. As internal functions, do we work with those principles? Do we actually have integrity? Are we objective? Do we have confidentiality? And are we professionally competent? Otherwise, I would like to appreciate each one of you for sparing time to attend this webinar. And I hope that we shall be able to meet in the subsequent engagements. And may the good Lord bless you all. Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Secretariat.
Thank you. Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you so much, CPS Samuel. You have really built sufficient knowledge as far as ethical culture is concerned in organization today to the members of the institute, students, and other colleagues, participants. It is now my pleasure to invite the Secretariat to give their closing remarks, and then the meeting will be closed. Over to you, Secretariat.
Okay, thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you so much, our presenter. It has been a great presentation. Thank you so much, Sam, for such a comprehensive presentation.
Welcome.
And wherever you were, let's put our hands together for Sam. I'm sure all of us have learned a lot from his presentation. I would also like to thank Stephen for being a great chairperson for this session. Thank you, Stephen. And thank you, participants, for the questions and comments. I'm sorry some of the questions have not been answered due to time, but if you have a burning question, you can send it to the Institute and we'll send it to our presenter and he'll give you an answer. Lastly, I would like to appreciate you for attending this forum. Nice evening, and you can leave at leisure.